There you go. Hoodie man. All right. Looking real comfortable. You know what I mean? It's all good.
Trying to loosen up a bit.
You got to loosen up, man. Life is about being loose. Well, not too loose, but to an extent, you know. I guess it depends on...
Not too loose.
It just depends on your level of hedonism. It just depends on how like you...
Oh, I like that kind of looseness.
Depends how much fun you like that. Right. It's all good. Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in to Men's Compass. I'm John Parker.
And I'm Dr. Daniel David.
And the Men's Compass is a video series where we're dedicating our time to helping men become better men via good, sound wisdom.
Right. Hopefully wisdom that will help men
Yeah.
have better lives.
Yeah.
Okay,
Therapeutic principles,
yes.
value sets, and wise sayings
Right.
and facts.
Right.
That will, not alternative facts, like facts.
No, real facts.
Real
Okay.
facts
Yes, real
that
facts.
will allow you to become a better you.
And so today's topic, we're talking about, are you a resilient man?
Yeah.
You know, resilience is really an important part of our overall psychology. It's not so much how much we can take, but how quickly we can bounce back. And I'm not talking about stuffing our feelings, and I'm not talking about denying our pain. It is, though, an attitude about how we live life.
Yeah.
A lot of guys come here and they speak to us about, you know, their issues, and often when they get down, they stay down. They're really depressed and they're really struggling, a lot of anxiety. And so we talk to men about how to live their lives better and really find a way to have resilience in their life, you know, adaptability. So one thing that we measure in mental health for men is the ability to bounce back, the level of flexibility in their thinking. Are they open-minded or closed-minded? Are they rigid compared to being more flexible and open? How do they deal with life and stress?
Yeah.
Do they have rigid rules, or are they able to roll with the punches, so to speak? These are really important issues that men face every day, and we're gonna talk about resilience in a way that I hope will be helpful to you.
Yeah. And I think what's important, or what you just said, and the list of things, the rigidity and flexibility and all of that, is what you'll find that the problem that we run into as men is that we'll try to fit a square peg in a round hole every single time.
Right.
And that's a clear indicator that you're not very flexible, right? You try to use the same methods, it's the same methodology, the same way of thinking, the same way of doing. Anytime and every time you try to solve a problem or meet new people or whatever it is that you're doing. And the key to what I think you said so wonderfully was that we have to be flexible. And rigidity, and some things are good, but in most times it's not helpful for us. And I think another thing that kind of sums up the idea of being flexible and being able to bounce back is the quote, we fall down 7 times, but we get up 8.
Yes,
right.
I like that one.
Yeah.
It's an ancient Japanese saying, fall down 7 times, get up 8. And I think it's not so many about how many times we fall down. It's always about how many times we get back up. And so it's really important for men to realize that. And you know, we want you to have the right kind of support, the right kind of information, so that you know that you're not alone in this type of situation. We see too many men who feel like they're isolated and alone, and when they get down, they don't have anyone to turn to. So it's an important aspect of being resilient is you know, to create some sort of social network. And you know, hopefully you know, you guys will come back here and get some more information, and this will be helpful to you.
Yeah. So what we want to do is we're going to jump into uncovering, discovering, figuring out if you're a resilient man. Right. And so we got a list of things that we'll go through and just kind of give you some points, some tidbits to understand, like, oh, maybe I'm not as resilient as I thought. Maybe I don't bounce back as well as I thought I do.
Right.
And kind of just help you, you know, grow in that area. So one of the things in understanding whether or not you're a resilient man and what your bounce back looks like is understanding the power of adaptability. So give us some ideas on what it means to be adaptable.
Absolutely. So in our modern society, adaptability is very crucial for success and for actually overcoming a lot of problems. When we are rigid in our thinking, we're not adaptable. And so when I look at men and try to understand where they're at in their lives, I will ask them, you know, how have you adapted to the situation? How have you changed? How have you made changes? And often they'll say, well, I've done this one thing or these particular things over and over again, and then they're expecting things to work out when they don't work out. So being flexible in our minds and in the way we do things, because ultimately thoughts translate into behaviors, right? That when we're flexible with our thoughts and our ability to make changes, then we do better. We just do better as a species. We can see that in the plant world and the animal kingdom. Whatever animal or plant adapts to whatever climate or conditions, they do better. So humans are very much like that.
Yeah, listen, when I'm talking to couples or when I'm talking to guys and they're asking about relationship stuff, I'm like, sir, if you don't learn to adapt in this relationship, you're doomed to fail.
Right.
Because the idea that when you're single and you do things a certain way or you want things to be a certain way, that's fine when you're just living for yourself. Right. But when you add a spouse in there, when you add a girlfriend, you involve children, you know what I mean? You have to be adaptable. Right. And you have to understand that, hey, just because this has always worked or worked in certain circumstances and situations doesn't mean it's always going to work in this relationship or that it's going to transfer into, what other areas of your life to where you've applied these same principles. Right. And so I think what people don't understand with the power of adaptability is that you have to have a good resource bank. You have to have a lot of tools in your tool belt. So that means you got to read, you got to learn, you got to come watch these videos, and you have to give yourself a lot of material to work with, because rigidity comes from not from having only one way of thinking or one way of doing or one way of being. So you got to kind of you got to give your palate something to work with. Right. All right. So the next idea is that resilience implies bouncing back from adversity. Right, bouncing back. Give me that. What is bouncing back?
Well, I'll give you an example. If I have a guy who's maybe in recovery for alcoholism and he is struggling with relapses. What we'll see is a guy relapse and he'll be down for 3 months and he'll be drinking for 3 months, feeling bad about his last relapse. And what I encourage guys to do is, if you do relapse, we don't want people to relapse, but it happens, is to get back on the train and the next day and say, okay, I'm starting over. Let me get back up. It's sort of like riding your bicycle. If you fall off your bike, you get back on. You don't stay down and say, well, I can't ride a bike, because you haven't forgotten how to ride a bike. So it's really important for men to understand that the quicker you bounce back with things and the more flexible you are, then you establish better habits. Because again, using the sobriety example, when guys are learning how to stay sober, it's often they'll put days together and hours and turns into days and days turns into months and months into years, and it's just because they keep going, they're consistent. Right. So adaptability then follows with consistency.
Yeah, and I think that's amazing. Because oftentimes people don't, it's like habits, right? So science says that it takes like 30 days to form a good habit, right? And then only 3 days to lose that habit, right? So it's clear that the longer you take to start something, get back on something, to get back on the horse, like you're saying, to get back on track after you've had a stumble, the harder it's going to be to create that habit or to start it over again. When you fall off, if you don't get right back to it, the longer that you're down, the harder it will become to get back up.
That's it.
All right. I struggled through that, but that's where mine was.
Well, and it's because guys who are rigid will fall down and say, "Well, I've fallen down," and this is who I am, and this is the way life is. And in reality, we have to get back up. We need to have that reflexive bounce back.
Yeah. I'm a terrible person, I think, but when you were talking, it reminded me of the life alert. I fall and then I can't get up. Like they have no problems immediately pushing that life alert button. I need some help. You know what I mean? And that's what guys do. They'll ignore the help that they have. They won't, they won't talk to their accountability. They won't do what they got to do to get back on their feet because of, like you said, the shame and the guilt and all of that. But we got to press past that, right? We got to move past that pride, and we have to understand that being resilient includes reaching out, getting the help you need, making sure that the people that are supposed to be on your side and have your back can actually do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And if you don't tell them what's going on, they're not going to be able to know, right? Unless they just see you, tripping out in public or something, or they can visibly tell that you're, relapsed or whatever the situation may be.
Absolutely.
Another thing that I think is good is that you have to understand that in resiliency and bouncing back and being flexible, it's the attitudes of your mind
Right.
that keep you from being flexible, that keep you from being able to bounce back. Tell us more about that.
Well, if I have, a lot of judgments going on, bouncing around in my head, and if I'm a critical person, if I'm, hard on myself, well, that attitude isn't going to help me to bounce back, And I think that this is a good analogy. I often ask guys, why don't oak trees grow on islands? And they kind of give me a little, what's he talking about, right? Like,
Smart guy.
yeah,
These analogies.
But the reality is that oak trees don't grow well on islands because hurricane winds take a very stiff, solid tree, and men want to think of themselves like oak trees, and when that rigid tree, that oak tree, gets hit by 170-mile-an-hour winds, right, or even 70, the branches start falling off and cracking, and trees split that way. So being rigid doesn't really help us in the midst of adversity or stress or anything like that. Rather, what kind of trees grow on an island? Palm trees.
Palm trees.
Right?
He's been to a lot of islands.
Right, I like islands, okay. But palm trees then bend with the wind. They don't just snap off. They're not rigid. They have a flexibility, and so when the wind hits, they kind of bend, and they go with the wind, and then they bounce back when the wind's over, right? And I think it's really important for men to grow that kind of mindset and that sort of internal attitude that I'm flexible, I'm adaptable, I can make it. I can change. I welcome change into my life. Men who resist change, especially around 40 years old, often face a crisis. That's what they call the midlife crisis, because men are feeling the changes come over them, and they're not willing to go with it. And even young guys coming out of high school, they're not willing to change their lifestyle to actually succeed, let's say in college or on a career path. They just want to do the same thing over and over again. And that's actually rigid.
So I think that people that are watching have to understand that being flexible, bouncing back, being adaptable is the key, is the basis for recovery. Right. If you're dealing with substance abuse or addictions or anything like that. Or diets, right? As well as just general life change, right? When you're not able to deal with new things, whether it's presidents, whether it's changing of CEOs of your company, whether it's employees, whether it's babies coming, whether it's your wife going through menopause, whatever that looks like, or girlfriend or whatever, when people around you are having changes and you're rigid, it doesn't help you adjust to what's going on around you, right? So being flexible, being adaptable, bouncing back well is not only good for recovery, but it's just general life, good health and well-being. And making sure that you don't become some old ornery, are you familiar with ornery? I don't know if that's a cultural. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, all right, just make sure some
like
people...
Ornery as a goat?
Yeah. Or mule, stubborn as a mule, right? I've just said that in certain company, and they were like, I don't know what your ornery means. So ornery, ornery, all right? You don't want to be that guy, right? Where when you get old and you become so rigid, you just damage your relationships, or you do things that are negative to yourself. And I think as guys become older, you become more and more rigid, unfortunately, and you become stuck in your ways, and then you end up that old grumpy guy in the nursing home because your kids don't want to deal with you,
cat,
right? I mean, grumpy cat has his measures. He has there's some good qualities found in that guy, but you don't want to be that guy when you start pushing people away and people don't want to be around you, right? So what we'll do, we'll just kind of wrap up thinking through some ideas of how to be more resilient. Like we've already talked about, shorten the time that it takes for you to get back on your feet, right? Don't let that be a long process. We talked about being open to the understanding that falling off your bike is a basic principle of learning how to walk, learning how to ride your bike, and learning to be flexible is something that is that same process. No baby says, man, I got up and fell down, I'm gonna stop walking. They usually get back up. They get up, right? Like that's what's good about be a baby. Be like a baby. Be like a palm tree. Be like a baby when necessary. Get back up. Be flexible. Letting go of your rigid beliefs, right, that limit your bounce back time. We talked about that. One thing that I want you to give us a little bit on is letting go of self-loathing, and how self-loathing can kind of be anti-resilience, anti-flexible, anti-adaptable.
With self-loathing, the basic attitude that we have with ourselves, John, it comes out in the work we do or the relationships we have, right? So it's so important just to understand that if I don't like myself and I'm not really kind or compassionate towards myself, well, I probably I'm going to be more critical and judgmental. And of course, when you're around people and they're judgmental or critical, you really don't want to be around them very long, right? But yet, we do that to ourselves, and it's hard to get away from ourselves, right, when we're critical. And I think that the important thing to remember is that we all make mistakes, and we don't always live up to everything that we expected, and maybe we should have had better expectations, adjust our expectations, or adapt to new situations and have the right expectations. When we have these rigid expectations that we need to perform a certain way because we don't feel good unless we do, then of course we're not going to be that adaptable. It just has to be one way, and that's where I think a lot of guys get into being stubborn or hard-headed, and go through the school of hard knocks, as we used to say. So I think it's important just to learn to love ourselves. That loving ourselves means that we can change, we can adapt, we can let go. Sometimes we need to let go. Sometimes we need to just breathe in and exhale, right? And just so that we feel better on the inside, right?
Yeah, and I think a key to self-loathing that I like to talk to guys about is just understanding that self-loathing is just a pity party. It may feel good momentarily, it may feel good even over a long time, where you can blame others, or you can say it was this or say it was that. But like we're saying, if you're trying to change, if you're trying to be better, if you're trying to be resilient, if you're trying to bounce back, if you're trying to be adaptable, you got to get past yourself. You got to get over yourself. You got to get over the mistakes. You got to let pride go. And you have to make sure that you don't allow yourself to get to this place where you just get in this sunken place and you just stay there.
Right.
There may be a moment of reflection, like, man, I really feel bad about what I did, or I really feel bad that I yelled at somebody, or I really feel bad that I wasn't able to hear what somebody was trying to tell me because of my own issues, right, or my own rigidity. But you can't stay in that place.
No.
And you have to make sure you ask for help.
Right.
That's what we're here for. That's what we do professionally. That's where, if you're in the Georgia area, come holla at us. Right. Come talk to us. We can help you get out of that rigid state. But the idea with asking for help is it decreases pride, right? It decreases your ability to self-loathe, and it allows other people to get involved in your life and kind of help you with the situation.
Absolutely.
All right. Any last thoughts that you may have on resilience?
No, just think of a basketball. I mean, if you don't have air in your basketball and you try to bounce it and it thuds on the ground, it's not life is not fun. Basketball's not fun. Right.
Yeah.
So you got to keep yourself, in a good, healthy mindset and be able to bounce back, and then life gets a lot more fun.
Yeah, you're right, man. I got so sensitive. I was like, any last words? You were like, no. I was like, oh man, dang, man, I'm sorry, man. That was pretty good. That made me laugh on the inside. But yes, hey, don't be a flat basketball, right?
Yeah, don't be a flat basketball.
Don't be a flat basketball. Don't be an oak tree. You know what I'm saying? Be flexible like the palm tree. Don't be a noodle, because we do want you to have a spine, right? But we don't, we just want you to go. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, don't be a jellyfish.
Don't be a jellyfish, man. And I think that at the end of the day, again, our goal is just to help you guys be better guys. And don't feel bad if you've been rigid, if you find yourself at this midlife crisis or whatever the case may be. Just get the help, ask for help, and move on. And you can't live in regrets, and you can't live in the past.
Right.
And I think once you all realize the importance of flexibility, and once it sinks in, that should be enough to drive you to coming to see us, or whoever you are, your local area, finding a good therapist, somebody that can help you work through this stuff.
Awesome.
All right. Well, hey guys, be flexible out there. Keep it 100, as we say where I'm from. And man, we hope that this was beneficial to you.
Right. So subscribe to our videos, like us please, and then share us with guys that maybe you think need to hear from us.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah. And right now, we also do Of Myths and Men. So if you go to ofmythsandmen.com, ofmythsandmen.com, you get some more resources, hear more from us, and just bless yourself. Once a day. You should do once a day Of Myths and Men. Check it out. All right. Thank you for listening. I'm Jon Parker.
And I'm Dr. Daniel Davis.
And this has been Men's Compass.